Most people think of ancient Egyptian society as primitive and undeveloped. I mean, it was a society that built pyramids, right? You can't get more backwards than that. But was this really true? How advanced was ancient Egypt? Ancient Egyptian civilization arose around the River Nile about 310 BCE, after the political unification of Upper and Lower Egypt by King Menes, and it lasted over 3,000 years until the last pharaoh was deposed by the Persians in 343 BCE. In terms of longevity, only the Chinese and Greek civilizations beat it. It is no surprise that so many myths and legends are associated with such an old and influential civilization. Ancient Egyptians were credited with inventing everything from toothpaste to plastic surgery. Some historians even believe that Egyptians visited the Americas before Christopher Columbus, carrying with them the seeds of maize, which then became corn in America. So just how much truth is there to these claims? How advanced was ancient Egypt really? Welcome to my channel. Today let's find out. Great architecture is often associated with advanced civilizations. But none of the ancient Egyptians' architectural achievements comes close to rivaling their pyramids. Pyramids have always been associated with primitive cultures. I mean, there are very few places in the world where they are still being built. And yet the pyramid is one of the most recognizable symbols of ancient Egypt. Why is that? Even today, when we are blessed with modern technology, scientists don't know exactly how the pyramids were built. There are numerous theories, but we have no evidence to prove any of them. We don't even know why the Egyptians started building pyramids in the first place. The Great Pyramid of Giza is believed to have been built as a tomb for the 4th dynasty, Pharaoh Khufu, who ruled Egypt between 2600 and 2500 BC. If he wanted a huge pile of rocks to commemorate his death, he sure got it. The Great Pyramid weighs an estimated 5,750,000 tons and has nearly 2 million stone blocks. Each block weighs 5 tons on average, but the size of some of these stones reaches almost 80 tons. Just imagine having to transport 80-ton blocks up a ramp without any modern tools. Or how did they even cut these stones? Most of the building was done manually with copper tools. This is because bronze tools could not be used because the Egyptians believed that it would pollute the sacred building material limestone. Copper tools were also used in other parts of the world, such as Greece and Mesopotamia. But the Egyptians had to import copper, since there weren't any copper mines in Egypt at the time. That is why they preferred working with limestone instead of harder granite. Granite was still used in places where extra strength was needed, such as the interior chambers of the pyramid. This would explain why many unfinished pyramids and temples are made of limestone and only the core structure is made of granite. Temples are another great example of ancient Egyptian architecture. If you ask me, they are even more impressive than pyramids. I mean, take a look at the Temple of Karnak. It took over 1,000 years to build and is 3 times the size of the entire Palace of Versailles. What is even more mind-blowing is that the builders of the Temple of Karnak didn't use any mortar to hold the stones together. Instead, they cut the stones so precisely that they fit together like a jigsaw puzzle. The Egyptians developed many technologies to help them construct great buildings. For example, they developed a type of crane to lift large stones to high places. To lift stones onto the tops of pyramids or temples. They also developed a sophisticated system of ramps to move heavy objects across long distances. Finally, they developed a type of hoist to raise heavy stones to high places. Without these inventions, the construction of pyramids and temples would have been virtually impossible. But what about medicine? Ancient Egyptian medicine was based on religious beliefs and was heavily influenced by magic. However, it was quite advanced for its time. Egyptian priests served as both religious leaders and physicians. They wore white robes and used herbs and other natural remedies to treat various illnesses. In addition, they performed surgery to remove tumors and treat wounds. In fact, they were even able to perform cataract surgery. But perhaps the most impressive aspect of Egyptian medicine was their knowledge of anatomy. Through their work as both priests and physicians, the Egyptians learned a great deal about the human body. They were familiar with all of the major organs and knew that the brain was responsible for controlling the body. Moreover, they had a good understanding of how the circulatory system worked and were even able to perform autopsies. All of this knowledge was eventually compiled into the Edwin Smith Papyrus, which is one of the most important documents relating to ancient Egyptian medicine. The ancient Egyptians were also well versed in mathematics. They needed a solid grasp of math to plan and execute their building projects. The Egyptians kept track of time using a 365-day calendar that was very similar to the one we use today. They were also able to calculate the area of a circle and knew that the circumference of a circle is equal to pi times the diameter. In addition, they had a system of weights and measures that was used throughout the empire. This system was based on the decimal system and was used for everything from trade to building projects. Finally, the ancient Egyptians were also skilled astronomers. They followed the stars closely and used them to keep track of time and predict the seasons. They knew that the earth was round and that it revolved around the sun. They also believed that the stars were fixed in place and that the earth was moving beneath them. This belief led to the development of astrology in ancient Egypt. But arguably one of the greatest advancements of the ancient Egyptians was their invention of hieroglyphics. Hieroglyphics are a form of writing that uses pictures to represent words or sounds. This system of writing is one of the oldest in the world, and it allowed the ancient Egyptians to keep records, communicate with each other, and pass down their culture and history to future generations. The Egyptians invented a reed pen about 3000 BCE to write on papyrus, which is made from the papyrus plant. By the Second Dynasty, the Egyptians had developed a form of cursive writing. But it wasn't until the Fourth Dynasty that hieroglyphic writing reached its peak. Hieroglyphics were used throughout the Egyptian Empire, and they remained in use until the 7th century CE. One of the reasons that ancient Egyptian society was so advanced was because of its unique geography. The Nile River provided fertile soil and regular flooding, which led to the growth of agriculture. This abundance of food led to population growth and urbanization. Additionally, the natural resources available in Egypt, such as limestone and granite, allowed the Egyptians to build great structures. Finally, Egypt's isolation from other civilizations protected it from outside interference and allowed it to develop its own unique culture. There are many other examples of ancient Egyptian advancement. They built dams and canals to irrigate their crops. They also developed a sophisticated system of roads that allowed them to communicate easily with other parts of the empire. In addition, the Egyptians were skilled metalworkers, and they were able to produce high-quality tools and weapons. However, it is important to note that not all Egyptians were equally advanced. The majority of the population was poor and lived in rural areas. They were primarily farmers who grew crops for their own consumption. In addition, slavery was widespread in ancient Egypt, and slaves were often forced to work on building projects or in the homes of the wealthy. Moreover, women in ancient Egypt had limited rights and were generally subservient to men. So the next time someone tells you that ancient Egypt was a primitive society, you can tell them that it was actually one of the most advanced civilizations in the ancient world. However, it is also important to remember that not all Egyptians were equally advanced, and that slavery and gender inequality were widespread. We are constantly learning new things about the ancient Egyptians and their achievements. As more and more evidence is uncovered, it is clear that they were a highly advanced civilization. They made significant contributions to architecture, medicine, mathematics, and astronomy, among other fields. Their innovations helped to shape the course of human history, and their legacy continues to inspire people today. And now for a quick disclaimer. Some of the visuals and reconstructions shown in this video are the property of their respective owners and are used for illustrative purposes only. Others may have been AI generated using Midjourney or Stable Diffusion and are purely speculative. Hopefully you learned something new today, and if you did, please subscribe. Thanks for watching.